After 2,000 years, a mystery lost to time is about to be unearthed.
It's the tomb of the Dragon Emperor and his army.
And a legendary evil will be awoken. The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
Hello and welcome to episode 32 of We'll Review It Our Shelves, the podcast where we review the movies on our shelves. Every 2 weeks we'll take a randomly selected movie from our collection and we'll review it ourselves. I'm Brian. I'm not going to say my last name. I think the people who have been with us for 32 episodes know who I am now. And joining me, as always, from the other side of the country. I was going to say planet, but...
Well, we're in America. That's pretty much, for most people, that is the planet. So.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Introduce yourself.
Daniel, from Los Angeles.
He sometimes goes by Dan, so I'm not going to call him Daniel. It's just awkward. It's just too many syllables. And I might put the emphasis on the wrong one. I mispronounce names, as evidenced in some of our previous episodes. The computer mispronounces names, like Pinocchio. So, As a point of note, though, Pinocchio was the computer mispronouncing the name. The Mummy, Tomb of the Last Dragon Emperor, was the computer pronouncing the word the way I...
spelled it.
Unintentionally told it to? It mispronounced it because I misspelled Emperor when I was typing out the list. I did correct it, and it does sound right now, but yeah, that was totally on me. Totally a mistake.
A mistakey.
Yeah, one of them. Yep, I think the E is silent, I'm pretty sure. Just on a language note, I'm not a strict purist in the sense of you must speak the language properly in order to convey your thought or idea. I'm all for making up new words. I think we've established that, again, through these 32 episodes. But I do prefer that people speak properly, as much as possible. I'm weird like that.
Well, it's always funny that the folks, not to jump too much into a political rabbit hole here, but it's always funny the folks that always want to maintain strict borders and speak English are the worst at grammar and spelling and command of the language.
That is a very general stereotype, and
I'd say it's more of an observation. I didn't say who says it, other than the people who exhibit a certain behavior, also consistently exhibit a similar behavior. So I'm not saying exactly who. It's just people who I observe exhibiting behaviors.
Okay, fair enough. We'll leave it at that. Okay, so we'll move on to listener feedback. We actually got 3, we'll call them pieces of listener feedback, and 1 movie ad to the listener request list. We'll start with our first piece of listener feedback, and that is from Brenda Edwards. She says, Brian, we always have some great dinner conversation right after Jeff has listened to one of your podcasts. And Brenda is listener Jeff Edwards' wife, so... Our podcasts lead to great dinner conversation, and that makes me happy. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's doing a lot more than I thought we would be doing. I'm not saying that we're making a bad podcast, but it's just, it's just 2 guys talking about movies. I didn't expect it to really bring families together.
Well, if we change one life, then it's a success.
Yes.
So they say. I mean, we're currently just shy of 700 episodes, or 700 downloads, so, we're doing okay.
Yeah.
We'd like to keep that up, so listeners, please tell your friends about us, and we can continue to grow and get even better, as we expressed in our first, well, actually it was episode 0, our introduction podcast, where we spoke of trying to get better at what we do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, even if you want to tell us how much we suck and, you want to cyberbully us, hey, send it in. We don't want to hear from you.
Please don't cyberbully us. I have a fragile ego. It's Italian.
Hey, you know, though, we're talking about Hollywood here, and in Hollywood, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
That's right. Publicity is publicity. So we also got listener feedback from Jeff Edwards, who said, another fantastic episode. Who knew there were so many ways to view Pinocchio, or Pinocchio, depending on how you want to say it. If you're the computer, you want to say it that way. And thanks for that. There are plenty of different ways, and in fact, we didn't discuss the myriad of ways that that movie had been represented on the screen. I know we missed quite a few reproductions, if you will, of the Pinocchio theme. It's interesting, and I don't know that I've spoken to you about this, Dan, but I actually talked with Jeff about the Blade Runner 2049 episode, and I told him that I was actually a little disappointed with the episode, not because I didn't think we had a great conversation about it, but because I had so much more to say. And I could have talked for hours and hours and hours. I
think we both could have on that. There's just so much to say about that movie.
Yeah, and one of the things that Jeff responded to me with that made me feel better about it was, yeah, you know what? I feel the same way about the first Blade Runner, and I've been talking about that for 30 years. Like, yeah, fair enough.
There you go.
That gives you a little bit of a perspective on that. It's a movie that's going to keep getting talked about. And again, Pinocchio, 78 years later, we were still talking about it.
Yeah, so. And and that's not to say that that's the only movie that we're going to talk about. I mean, like I said, it just happens to be, at least for me, I can speak for myself, that, Blade Runner being one of my favorite sci-fi or anything movies, it's just one of my favorites, and there's going to be lots of other movies that I'm going to talk about for decades.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we've spoken of at least 31 previously, and they will be immortalized on the internet.
Yeah, and I'm convinced that my final words on my deathbed will be some sort of movie reference.
Oh, bloody hell.
Yes.
I seem to recall that from the Monty Python episode.
He's like, he died singing, "Always look at the bright
side of life." Damn you. Anyway, and our third piece of listener feedback, because we're still on listener feedback, is actually from my wife, who apparently took umbrage with my comment that she doesn't listen to the podcast, because she commented, "P.S. Your wife does listen to your podcast, contrary to what you stated in this episode." So, I got yelled at in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really. She just said, "I do actually listen to your podcast. I just don't listen to all of them." I said, "Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah.
As long as you're listening, it's more downloads.
Yeah, that's probably... My wife doesn't listen to the podcast.
I'm leaving that in, just so you know. But that wraps it up for listener feedback, so I want to thank all of our listeners for providing that feedback. Actually, it's not all of our listener feedback. We did have someone request that we add Ghostbusters 1984 to the listener list, random listener selected list, coming up in 3 episodes. So that's on the list now. So we're back to having 6 selections.
Okay, sounds good.
Again, listeners, if you continue to listen all the way through to the end and you get to the part where we tell you the different ways to contact us, you can provide us with more suggestions or feedback. We are on Twitter now. I think I put that out on the Facebook page, but just as a reminder, we are on Twitter and we're gaining a following. I think we have like 6 followers right now, but
yay!
It's more than I had the day before, so more than we had the day before. So
okay.
It's pretty cool. Okay, so with listener feedback wrapped up and the announcement that we're on Twitter and the inclusion of a new listener selection or listener request, I suppose that's the proper term, let's move on to The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor? Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. So how did this movie get on your shelf, Dan?
It's not.
Really?
This was your pick.
It's not my pick. It's the computer's pick. I just happen to own it.
Yeah, therefore it's your pick.
Oh, fine.
It's on your shelf. Now, just right now, I'm just try to think of this in Samuel L. Jackson's voice. Is that, "Oh man, I will never forgive your ass for this shit. This is some repugnant shit."
from Pulp Fiction, right?
Yeah.
In fact, they were cleaning brains out of the back of the car, if I recall.
Yeah, probably that'd be my brains after I blew them out from watching this movie.
So, spoiling it for the where it goes on your shelf if you did own it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a little thing by the shelf. It's called the wastebasket.
Just knocked it right off. Oops! Oh, the cat got it. We don't own a cat. It was stray. It came in. It was crazy. Yeah, I own this movie because I enjoyed the first two Mummy films as fun throwback serial entertainment. I think they did a great job of capturing the serials of the 30s and 40s, kind of like what George Lucas was going for with Star Wars and stuff, and Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only difference is that Indiana Jones was good.
But that depends on which one you're talking about. But
the
we'll
first
talk
one.
about that when we get to them.
Okay.
So when this movie came out, Christy's a big fan of the Mummy movies. I mean, I enjoyed them, but she's a much bigger fan than I am. And she likes Jet Li, so we thought, hey, this will be great. We'll go see the Mummy movie with Jet Li in it. And we watched it, and I think it took a little while after it came out before we actually bought it. But Christy picked it up because she likes Jet Li and she likes the Mummy movies, and I think she thought it was okay. Again, she listens to the podcast, so I've heard. So she didn't actually tell me what she thought about this movie, so we'll just wait for her listener feedback to find out what she felt about it. But she's the one that actually bought it and put it on the shelf. So I remember owning it. I mean, in the sense that I knew we owned it, but I don't think I've watched it since we got it. It's just not one of those movies that I feel the need to go back to all the time. So, again, kind of spoils where it's going to go on my shelf, but you already spoiled it with yours. It's not even on your shelf. So,
yeah,
so,
it's funny. Movies like this tend to accelerate that where does it belong on your shelf portion.
like suddenly we're ahead of this. Well, again, we've already sort of gushed about Blade Runner 2049 in this episode already, but that one didn't exactly set itself up to be a big shock where that would go on our shelves either. So
yeah,
I'm discovering over these episodes that we generally tend to give that away at the beginning, sort of where it belongs. So I don't know, maybe we could shift that up a little bit in the future. Listeners, tell us what you think. All right, so where do you want to start?
I'd love if I could play it. Where I would love to start is playing the MST3K theme song. It's just, especially we'll send them cheesy movies, the worst we can find. But the only difference is nobody monitoring my mind. But it's just, yeah, it's just that I don't know where to begin.
I don't think this is the worst movie I've ever seen, and I don't think this is the worst movie that I own.
No, I'm not going to say that, but it was pretty bad.
It would have been fun to do the MST3K thing with.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. I mean, that's what Nina and I were doing, was just, making fun of it, jokes left and right.
That sounds like it would have been fun. One of these days, we're going to have to get together either in a neutral location or at each other's house and watch one of these movies and then do the episode. I know we've tried to make it work before, but it doesn't always work out. So,
we'll work on it. Like I said, travel seasons, it's like you got to find the right time.
Yep.
So I guess, the first thing to bring up, and which I find funny because Nina brought this up, and it's like, what is there to talk about a movie like this? And I guess the thing is just to talk about, like, what was wrong with it.
There were some good things, and I wrote them down in my notes.
Okay.
There were a couple of things I'm like, well, I kind of like that. I like that.
Okay.
That was cool. So there were parts, which again goes to this is not the worst movie I own, but...
Yeah, but that's to me, it's like, yeah, there are some fascinating things when I visited the sewage treatment plant. It's like, ooh, that's kind of neat, but it was still a sewage treatment plant.
Wow. You do not like this movie.
Well, first thing that I took note of when this movie started, I don't know if you can call this a cliche or a trope. I'm still don't have a good command of that vocabulary, but the part where it's like, oh yeah, the once upon a time, where they tell you why you should fear this villain, the Dragon Emperor, which, again, another one, the name, the Dragon Emperor, I mean, that's kind of just It almost seems like the word dragon has been overused in movies. You know, it's the dragon warrior, the dragon emperor, the dragon soldiers, or whatever. You know, it just seems like it's a little overused. But that's neither here nor there. But you know, it's like the first 5 to 10 minutes telling you why you should be afraid of this guy. And, you know, it's just like, it's that thing where we're talking about, it's like show me versus tell me, you know, type of thing. And right now they're telling me, and I'm just not feeling it. You know, I mean, I just, throughout the whole movie, and it's just like, okay, yeah, this guy wants to conquer the world, get in line. You know, there's so many villains out there that want to do that. And it's like, he brought nothing to the table. There's no reason for me to fear this guy.
So, I'm gonna mildly disagree with your take on the opening. I kind of agree with you that the "Everybody Wants to Rule the World," to borrow Tears for Fears' musical refrain. But what else are you going to do? It's not like he was going to destroy the world. That's cliche. There's only so many variations on a story that you can tell, and it's more about making that variation interesting, which in the whole of the movie, I don't think they did.
Well, it's the thing, they're trying to stuff so much of a character into 10 minutes, you know, whereas the comparison I can make right now is Lord of the Rings. Okay? Mm-hmm. I saw the movies before I read the books. Okay, I was like one of those guys that never read them as a child. So when the Peter Jackson movies came out, I was totally fresh into it. This is all a new story to me. Yeah, the first 10 minutes telling who Lord Sauron was. And it's just like, okay, this guy seems pretty evil. You know, he wants to conquer the world or Middle Earth. You know, so it's like, okay, yeah, he's scary. But they continued for 3 movies to build up who this character is and why I should fear him. You know, and when it came time to destroy the ring, it was so emotionally satisfying. At some points of the movie, it almost got to the point where it was like, oh wait, he might actually win. You know, it's like, but you know, you kept telling yourself, well, no, you can't win in these movies. You know, he's gonna be evil will be defeated. So when he was destroyed, there was an emotional payoff. And again, with this movie, I just did not feel it.
And I think part of that reason is because the first 2 Mummy movies were about Imhotep, and this movie was like a bolt-on. It was one of those, you know, we made some money with those Mummy movies. Maybe we should make a third, maybe you think? And that's evidenced by the fact that they couldn't get Rachel Weisz back. You know, the original Evie. You know, you got, what's her name? Maria Bello, I think her name is. Who did not impress me as Evie.
No, she did not. But, you know, you want to talk about little shining gems in the movie. I did kind of get a kick out of the scene where she's reading her book and say, you know, is it based on you? And it's like, well, that was an entirely different character. And I'm like, okay, that's clever.
Yes, it was very, as they say nowadays, meta.
I don't say that.
I said they, I didn't say you.
No. I'm included.
Those cod-farm characters are kids. I don't even think they say it anymore. But it's funny you bring up that scene, because for me, that scene encapsulates this movie when one of the listeners or one of the audience members asks her, is there going to be a third book? And then they go through that whole 5-minute spiel of her just sitting in front of a typewriter trying to figure out what to do for the next book. I kind of feel that way about this movie. They're like, what can we do? What can we do? What didn't we do in the other one? China's got mummies. We could do that. Yeah, we could totally make that work. Yeah, Chinese mummies. That'll be great. That's something different. We haven't done that yet. And they just slapped this movie together and said, yeah, it's CGI. Just CGI. It'll be great. They'll love it. And that coupled with changing the characters and then moving the cast forward in time, because in the second movie, Alex, the kid, is 9 or 10, something like that. And in this, he's 24, 25-ish, maybe?
Yeah, probably. Give or
it was
take.
like 15 years later. And I tell you, not that people don't sometimes look like they haven't aged, but Brendan Fraser doesn't look like he aged a day from one movie to the next. And 15 years is a good time. You should have a few more wrinkles going on there. Mm-hmm. A few more crow's feet or whatever. So that part, again, I get it. I can do that. I've seen movies let people age, decades, but usually there's a little bit of makeup help. so it looks like they're doing something, and I wasn't really buying it, partly because Brendan Fraser is not one of the best actors in the world, in my opinion. Good enough to get jobs, but I think he peaked in the 90s.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why, it's that I just couldn't really care so much about these characters, because, like you said, they don't look like they aged. You feel emotional nostalgia when you see things age a bit. I mean, I think it's with Star Trek, it's like where all the characters started showing their age, it's like, yeah, people really felt that, you really feel connected because you've been with them for such a long time. And then if, you want to talk about other endearing characters, I mean, when The Force Awakens comes up, yeah, you saw a very aged Solo. I don't think I would have had that emotional connection if I didn't see that. If they made him look as young, or they tried to give him that little
CGI him up.
Yeah, CGI him up or whatever, just try to make him look young again. I don't think I would have felt it as much as I.
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to mention Indiana Jones when they made the fourth movie. Indiana Jones had aged. You're like, look, it happens. This movie is 10 to 15 years later, and you couldn't tell.
And that's the thing, though. It's not only did he look older, he also acted older. Because that part where he swings and he doesn't get into the truck and he ends up in the other truck, it's like, man, there was a time I could make that.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of it's his being older is a thing. Mm-hmm. It's part of the movie. But it's funny because, again, there's only really two legit characters or two legitimate actors in this movie that were in the previous movies, and that's Brendan Fraser and Evie's brother, John Hannah. They're the only two that carried over because everyone else is new. Alex wasn't that old when he was in the last movie, so that had to be a new actor. Evie's a totally new actor who I did not care for, and everybody else is somebody totes different. So it didn't feel like the previous movies. It, like I said, felt like it was just something that was slapped together from a let's make a movie standpoint and then thrown out into the theaters. Now, getting to the thing that I liked, since we were kind of deviated off of the beginning, I liked the beginning. You did have to set the scene like, hey, we're not in Egypt anymore. There are Chinese mummies, or this is how this came to be. I didn't have a problem with that. One of the things that I did like about it, though, and I don't remember when Hero came out, which is another Jet Li movie, if you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen it.
The character that Jet Li played made me think of Hero. And some of the things that happened in the movie made me think of that movie. And I really appreciated it for the comparison, because I was like, oh, this might be better than I remembered. And it's on a rewatch. So I kind of enjoyed that because, again, it is a little bit of comparative filmmaking. So I like that. Yeah, and that, right now, granted, this is going to be a little bit of armchair, what do they call it, armchair quarterback here. If they had transposed that character into this movie, it would have at least made the villain a little more sympathetic too. Because if he just kind of expressed that, I'm trying to unify a nation, or like he had an actual goal instead of just I'm going to conquer the world. Yeah, they tried throwing in those little. It's like, oh, I'm going to bring order out of chaos and everything. But again, like I said, just to me that wasn't enough. But if they transpose that character from Hero, because he actually had good intentions. He wanted to unify China. He wanted to make it all one powerful country and everything like that. To me, that would have made the villain a little bit more sympathetic and connectable. And again, I think I've said it before. It's like, some of the best villains are ones that you can empathize with and connect with. It's. Oh, absolutely. Aside from that brief 10 minutes, you don't see Jet Li as Jet Li doing anything Jet Li-like for most of the rest of the movie until the very end. He's just the CGI terracotta dude running around. And that's not really particularly intriguing, mostly because they've done it before with Imhotep. So I felt like this movie was a complete and total rehash of the first one, only not as good. Or not as fun and entertaining. I don't really think all three of them are that particularly great as far as movies go, but the first two were at least kind of fun, and they had some interesting parts about them.
Like you said, the concept of mummies from a different region, that was a good concept. They had something there. But they had a seed with a seed of a sequoia that had great potential, and they just said, all right, let's see it, make it grow, and threw it in the toilet.
Oh, yeah. Well, eventually it'll grow out of my plumbing or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, somewhere in a landfill in wherever they filmed this is a giant sequoia getting ready to sprout. And it might actually make a good movie one day. Yeah, no. Anyway, but the other part that I did kind of enjoy was, and I think we've discussed this beforehand, how to properly pronounce it, but Michelle Yeoh?
Yeah.
I've always said Michelle Yeoh, but if it's Yeoh, it's Yeoh. I'm not sure. You say it is, so I will bow to your knowledge. I cared for her in this movie. I wish she'd have been in it longer.
Yeah.
She is by far the bright, shining star or directional diamond thing to Shangri-La in the whole movie. Everything else was like, oh, you're in a movie. Look at you go. Yay.
Yeah, I just find it very hard to believe that, Michelle Yeoh coming from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon going to this. It's like, I don't see her as somebody who needs money that badly.
Sometimes you get pick a bum movie. I mean, it happens. I've seen plenty of great male and female actors in crappy movies and said, oh, yeah, you were actually the best part about the whole movie, but the movie sucked.
Yeah.
It happens. Sometimes you just pick the wrong script and think it's a winner, and it's not. It's like going and betting the ponies, eh? Sometimes you go to the ponies and, Tommy Fourlegs doesn't make it across the finish line. Bad analogy, sorry.
That was really racist, man.
Really? Yeah, when we watch Goodfellas, I'm doing the whole episode like that, I'm just saying.
Okay.
Or A Bronx Tale.
But, kind of going back to Michelle Yeoh, I guess, if I want to say something positive or anything, then maybe, she did this movie because she thought it would be fun. And maybe she did have fun making this movie.
I hope so. I mean, I would hate to think that going to make a movie is a slog, even though sometimes you hear about that in the trades, in like Variety or something. Like, oh my God, I totally hated making this movie. You'll never hear it on the press junkets, but they'll tell you 10, 15 years later, like, oh my God, the director was garbage, blah, 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 blah.
I hated my co-star.
Yeah, Jared Leto kept sticking dead rats in my trailer. Oh, wrong movie, sorry. Yeah, so I think she, amidst the spate of cliches in this movie, was a breath of fresh air just from her acting ability, and I liked her. So, again, that's another good point for the movie.
Yep, and just to kind of keep on a little bit of a roll of good points, little observation that I'd like to make, and I don't know how founded it is. This is just surface, because like I said, I again, we were talking about if it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would get done. I watched this movie the last minute and everything, so just before we started recording is when I watched it.
Did you rent it from the streaming service, who shall remain nameless, who does not provide us with any sort of sponsorship? Amazon.
Yeah. Yes. And like I said, the observation I have to make is, on the surface, I mean, I'm sure somebody can take this apart, but hey, do your best. But kudos to who made this? Universal?
Yes.
Kudos to the producers who actually had Chinese actors playing Chinese roles.
It's funny. I actually noted that down as well. The entire country of China was populated by mostly Chinese people, which is crazy. I know. Yeah,
well, I mean, it's like I'm looking, just on the initial list of the cast list on IMDb. I'd say a good half of them are of Chinese descent, which is, hey, great. Not a whole lot of whitewashing in this, although, to temper that, there was the like, oh yeah, we need the white man to save the day type of thing. But hey,
I don't necessarily think that that's a fair statement, because the Mummy movies were Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz saving the day. So, yeah, they could have had a Mummy movie with all Chinese people doing Chinese stuff, but it's not the same series of movies. It would have been a totally different franchise or one-off movie. So I don't necessarily buy into the, still had to have the white guy saving the day. It was just, it's their movie. What do you expect them to do?
Again, I've seen it done where the actor takes the bow to, like, hey, yeah, I'm the star of the movie, but you know what? I'm clearly out of my element in this one, and I have more admiration for the ones that can say, yeah, I'm here. I was the distraction, and Lynn, the daughter of Michelle Yeoh's character, who was the one who was charged, and for the last 2,000 years training to take down this emperor, I'd have been very happy.
Had she actually taken down the Dragon Emperor?
Had she been the one, because that was, to me, that was rightfully her job.
I don't disagree with you. I just think that, again, it's not an intentional thing. I just don't know that somebody sat down and said, we're not going to let the Chinese character do this.
Well, that I would have been, I'm not going to, no, actually, let me rephrase it. I'm not going to say I would be okay with that, but that would have been a little bit more understandable, because then it's like you can address that, but I mean, I don't think anybody even thought of it. Nobody even thought of the idea of, oh yeah, this, woman who, for the most part in this movie was a very strong and determined woman, which was like great, until later on she became the damsel in distress, and I'm like, oh god, here we go again and everything.
Oh yeah, there were cliches in this movie.
Yeah, and the thing though, it's just like, yeah, it's disturbing that nobody even. I really can't call them evil in the sense that it's like, oh yes, everyone would love if the woman did, but we're not going to do that because, it's like, no, it's more distressing to me that they didn't even, that they probably didn't even think about it. It's like, oh yeah, just naturally, yeah, Brendan Fraser and his son are going to do it.
I think this movie was supposed to be the same thing that Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Lost Alien People in Peru was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a handoff movie. It was supposed to be, look, his son can kill mummies too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they had to give him the opportunity to carry on the mummy killing bit. Had they actually done what I think they were intending to do, which is to make another mummy movie, which they set up when Jonathan went to
Peru.
The brother, when he went to Peru, and they soon found mummies after that. They set it up so it could have been the son going instead of the parents and just handed off the franchise to a new group of actors. In that way, yes. I do agree that the young lady who had, well, not so young, the 2,000-year-old girl who had spent
woman.
The majority of her, okay, fine, woman, you're right, I'm sorry, who had spent all of her life training to protect the world from the Dragon Emperor, only to be robbed of her mission in life. That's got to breed a little resentment later on in that relationship that was very awkwardly inserted into the movie. Like, oh, hey, by the way, you two are going to fall in love because your parents did it, or because the two characters did in the previous ones, so people are expecting it. You kind of have to do that. I think it would have been a much more satisfying ending had she actually made the kill, and because her mother had sacrificed both of their mortalities, had she actually died making that kill. She actually made the sacrifice, and he had to, the son had to live with knowing, thinking maybe I could have done something else or whatnot, or.
Okay, and hey, if we're throwing again the armchair quarterback here, I'd have been happy if, again, he's fighting Rick, Brendan Fraser's part, and in the minute of his distraction, Lynn drives half the dagger into his back, and he kind of laughs it off, going, it's like, you didn't quite make it. And then the son puts in the other half. So everybody helps, type of thing, But I mean, it's just like,
yeah,
she's not robbed of her birthright. Evil is defeated. Again, that's just me. If I was the director.
Yeah, but would it have been cliche to have her kill him, or is this breaking the cliche? Or is it just a whole nother cliche?
I don't think her killing, doing what she was meant to do would have been the cliche. I think, to me, having the big Hollywood star, so to say, do it, I think, to me, that was the cliche. I could be wrong.
I agree. Listeners, let us know what you think, because obviously we're wrapped around the cliche axle here, because, again, it kind of goes to what I'd said earlier. I mean, movies are generally cliche because there's only so many different ways you can tell the story of individual struggle.
Well, so that's an interesting thing that we really have been exploring and everything, and I don't think we've really actually focused on it. But I mean, it's like, I think the three things that we need to learn to really differentiate, especially when we're communicating our opinions about this, is like the difference between a cliche, a trope, an homage. Or even a fourth category, an archetype. You know, it's just like, what's the differences between those things? Because, I mean, you know, the hero archetype, okay, that's fine. You know, when you do that, obviously you can't escape that because that's just storytelling. You know, but then there's the cliche where it's just like, oh, this again, you know, you get bored of it, you get tired of it, you don't want to see it anymore. Whereas a trope, a tool of storytelling, you got to make one thing happen so other things can happen.
But I think cliches and tropes are functionally the same thing. I think the use of the word generally implies how you feel about it. I'm more dismissive of cliches.
Yeah.
But tropes, I can kind of, like, oh, it's a trope, but I dealt with it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think tropes can lead to something good. And I kind of just see it's a better use of a tool to make a plot move along.
Right, so there are no tropes in this movie, is what you're saying. It's all cliche.
Mostly cliche. He's only mostly dead, you know?
But mostly dead is still also slightly alive. But moving past the things that I liked, because I've already listed those. It was the beginning and Michelle Yeoh.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say there was one other thing that I liked, but actually it's more leaning towards something else. I was then a little bit more disappointed.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about that now, or you want to talk about your thing?
I do. Let's go.
Okay.
I've already covered the things I like. Let's move into that.
The one thing I guess is like in the middle, something else that had potential, and it would have been nice if it was just a little bit more explanation. But the character of the Mad Dog McGuire,
who was there for all of like 10 minutes total.
Yeah, well, you know, he's the pilot, so obviously he's got my interest. It would have been nice if he was somebody that he remembered from other movies. Again, there's that nostalgia thing where it's just like, yeah, it's an old friend. You know, it's like he meets him in the bar and it's like, oh, Mad Dog, you know, he's a good friend and everything. And it's just like, yeah, you kind of, again, this is another one of those, you told me he's a good friend, but you really haven't shown me anything.
Yeah, the only reason he was a good friend is so that he could fly them somewhere.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, he could have been any other character. It's like, hey, I remember you. I saw you in the phone book. You know, you can fly things, right?
You are Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
He's Chekhov's old friend.
Yeah, you know, and that's the thing. It's just like, I love the actor. I've seen him. He was in that movie Dog Soldiers. That's where I first saw him. I don't know if, hopefully, I think that's on the list. We'll talk about that later. Werewolf movie.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I know of it. I haven't seen it.
I like the idea of the character, the gruff pilot. They just didn't do anything with it, and they didn't do enough with it. And again, that kind of sums up there was a lot of potential in this movie, and like I said, it's just taking that potential and just flushing it down the toilet for the most part.
Speaking of the potential and the things that you could have made better, the old friend in China. Okay, I will buy that if you show me at some point that they actually had a relationship, other than the fact that this was the guy they hired to play the role of the guy who's supposed to be Rick O'Connell's old friend. But at the beginning of the movie, once you get past the finding of the Emperor's tomb and the terracotta army and all that kind of stuff, you flash back to jolly old England, and you've got Rick O'Connell, the stereotypical American, trying to retire to his life of luxury in this 48-room mansion in the middle of nowhere.
That poor thing.
Yeah, trying to fish, and I guess they made money off of the book sales? Because they weren't exactly filthy, stinking rich in the first two movies, and now they're fabulously wealthy.
Well, didn't she come from money? I forget.
I don't think so. I mean, she was just a librarian. I mean, maybe they had some money, but I don't recall exactly. So
yeah, I don't either.
It could be, but if they came from money, then why is Jonathan always trying to find the next big money-making scheme? Maybe he just wants more money, I get that, but I always thought they were lower middle class, where they were always just trying to do the thing, and their parents paid for them to go to school, had that kind of money, but I don't know that they were fabulously well off. But that's not what I'm actually trying to get to.
Okay.
They have this fabulous mansion, and they've got a butler, and this very tired cliche of this very active couple that were out doing things and living an exciting life, and now they're retiring to this quiet, sedate life in the country. It works in some movies if you do it right, and this movie just did not do it right. It was so ham-handed in the, oh, remember when we used to go out and chase bad guys and do things? And they speak of this past that we don't even know of. If they said, remember when we used to hunt mummies? And, we used to go on archaeological digs and stuff. That was kind of fun. Remember that? But no, apparently after the first 2 mummy movies, they went into spycraft? I'm not necessarily certain how an archaeologist / librarian goes into the spy trade as an active field spy, which is what they apparently were. I can believe it if you give me some evidence of that in the movie, but you didn't. There was nothing in any of the 3 movies that even remotely led to, hey, they're going to be spies, or this is the lifestyle that they are going to live, or even show me that they did it. It's just some guy showing up going, oh, you are our best operatives. Here, carry this diamond to China. Like, all right, when did this happen? Maybe instead of doing that, going, hey, just go, look, your son found something big, and we would like to send you there as representatives because we know you're archaeologists. It's your son. Can you take this with you? Leave that whole mythical, made-up spy crap that, we never saw on the cutting room floor and just send them there to visit their kid. I'm pretty sure a find like that would have made the news. And radio exists, so I'm sure they would have found out somehow that their kid did a thing. So I really, that, in the first 15 minutes of the movie, you're like, well, that's just ridiculously cliche, and it makes no sense.
Watching that scene and then, of course, listening to you talk about it, I'm really on board with this part of the conversation. It's like, yeah, it's a lot of like, I don't know anything about this, and I don't care. The movie that I think of, and I remember my cousin talked about this, my cousin Bill. It was I don't know if you remember a movie called Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
Yes.
When we watched that movie, he summed it up quite succinctly. And it's just like, you're watching these characters and knowing their backgrounds, and I'm just thinking, who cares? Because the character development was just so lacking in that. And that's what we have here. It's like, wait, when did this spycraft stuff and everything? And I just remember the thing he said that probably would have saved Sky Captain, might have saved this one, at least made it a little better. Sometimes if you just have like a wall of pictures.
Yeah. Kind of a show rather than tell.
And a perfect example of that I can bring up, and I know you're going to love this, is the scene in The Incredibles when she learns that Bob is on some island and she needs to fly out there, and she calls the guy and it's like, I need you to do me a solid. If it was just that, we'd have been like, what, suddenly she's a jet pilot? What, it's like, we don't know anything about this. But just that little flash of a picture of her with that guy showing that, oh, okay, there's a past. Maybe she obviously does know how to fly because she knows this guy. There's an old picture. That was enough. It was just a little tidbit amounted for about a second and a half worth of screen time. And it was enough to say, okay, she's a pilot.
And the other piece of that is, you knew she had a past. You knew she had a past doing hero stuff. And it's not outside of the realm of possibility to think that she at one point had to learn how to fly a plane. Because she was heroing. In this movie, we have to go completely outside of anything we've seen these characters do in the past and visualize this in-between time where they were doing something that wasn't archaeology or adventuring, whatever it was Rick O'Connell did.
I think there was enough of his adventuring, because, a lot of the stuff that happened in the first 2 Mummy movies happened in public. There was a lot of that, going through the streets and everything like that. So their deeds could feasibly not have gone unnoticed. So somebody took attention. So it to me, again, if you just had that little bit of catalyst in there, that shows it's like, oh yeah, he was approached by agents or whatever, or something like that, because his actions have, been noticed by I don't know, what's the British Secret Service called? MI something or other. I forget. Forgive me.
MI6.
Yeah, I mean, so
Well, I don't think it was MI6 at the time, but it would have been the OSS,
Yeah.
I believe.
yeah, something like that.
Or no, that was us. Anyway.
But again, he would have been noticed. He would have been approached. It would have worked. Again, if he just had that little thing to show us, like a little picture or just something, or a little bit more of a conversation that talked about, oh yeah, your service to the Queen. I think that would have helped.
And the other piece that sort of kind of eats away at this whole spy history thing is Evie wrote 2 mummy books, and she's strapped for material for a 3rd book when they've lived this exciting life as spies and operatives. You could easily make that into a spy novel, or some other sort of conversation about how they did things other than just the mummy thing, and tied that all together so they had a reason to do the thing.
That would have been nice.
Personally,
Yeah,
I think they could have, like I said earlier, just chopped that whole bit out and said, look, your kid found a tomb. Maybe you could go see it.
Not to pile whipped cream onto this too much. You could have also just had a conversation between the two saying, I wish I could just write about our spy stuff. Well, honey, we can't do that.
Yeah.
So,
again, a throwaway line that would have had connective tissue to the in-between time from The Mummy 2 and this movie. But no, we get some made-up crap that doesn't make sense, and we're just supposed to buy it.
Can you hear me? Okay.
I can, and for our listeners, Nina is joining us for a few moments to give us her thoughts on the movie.
Okay. All I wanted to say was that listening to what Dan is talking about, I would just like to bring some perspective to the movie. And what I would like to add is that for the simple viewer like myself, The Mummy 3 follows the same template as the first one. It gives you the background, it gives you the adventure, and it gives you kind of a cheesy closure. And the thing that I did like about this 3rd movie, there weren't a lot of things, but what I did like is that most of the characters did come back, including the silly brother-in-law who everyone loves and adds the little, quirk to the film. So that's what I was going to say, is that I understand there are a lot of, cliche moments. There's a lot of, very cheesy jokes, I would say, or, cheesy scenes where you see the setup coming, and you're like, oh, okay.
A lot of facepalm moments,
Yeah, but I just want to say that...
like the yakking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I just feel like if you're a fan of The Mummy and you're just there for the sequel viewer kind of thing, you just put it on in the background. Sometimes it's on TNT on Sundays and you're making breakfast. It doesn't bother you, right?
That's about the way I feel about this movie, though. It's kind of one of those background movies. You're like, I mean, if it's on, it's on. I'll kind of watch it. I will say, and I've already actually talked to Dan about this just a little bit. Actually, the only 2 actors that reprise their roles are Brendan Fraser and John Hannah, who plays the brother.
Right.
Even Evie is a different actress.
Right. Well, that was kind of funny the way that they infuse that part of oh, I'm a totally different person. It's like, you're a totally different actress.
Yeah, who I don't like nearly as much as Rachel Weisz.
I know.
So...
Yeah, but that's all I was going to say, is that I understand if you're a movie critic why you wouldn't enjoy the movie, but I just feel like if you're just along for okay, well, the second one wasn't as good, the third one's definitely not going to lead to a fourth, then it's kind of all right, you know what I mean? So
I know what's the analogy you used? The final nail in the coffin.
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay, we're definitely not making a fourth.
Yeah, this mummy ain't coming back out.
All right, these 2 mummies are dead.
Yeah, but it did follow the similar template of the first one, though. They did the same thing with the background. They did the same thing with the adventure starting, the adventure, and then it was all of the endings were a little bit cheesy. I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, The Mummy 2 had The Rock in it, raising his eyebrow. That was it.
Right.
They managed to squeak out the Scorpion King out of that just from his 3 minutes in the movie.
Right. So
his presence, his aura, his gravitas.
Je ne sais pas.
Yeah, that.
I wouldn't call it gravitas, but yeah, okay, fine. Cool. Well, thanks, Nina. I appreciate it. If you want to jump in later, we'll keep the mic on for you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, there you go.
Don't be so...
Yeah, she's telling me, don't be so negative. Well, stop showing me negative movies.
Hey. We were positive. There was some positivity.
Yeah.
I will disagree, though, with Nina slightly. Actually, no, I'm going to 100% agree with her. This is exactly the same thing as the first movie, just not as good.
Yeah, she agrees.
Okay. And that's kind of a good transition point with Nina jumping in, is making the same movie over again can work sometimes, but there were some things they added in this movie that I don't recall being in the first one. Not that there was a place to insert Yetis in the Egyptian desert, but Yetis, I don't know that I needed them.
I don't know if you needed them. They could have been cooler.
A lot. Well, they're in the Himalayas. They're really cool by default.
Yeah, again, the same as like having a Chinese cast, I think, which is a good thing. I mean, yeah, at least the Yetis were appropriate in their region. I don't have so much of the fact of Yetis being here in this movie. I mean, I think you pointed out before in a previous conversation that in the second movie there were the little little things in the jungle. Would you call them the wood nymphs? I think it was called like little Zuni fetishes. They kind of harken back to an old horror movie from way back in 1975 called Trilogy of Terror, and it was like a 3-part anthology. And the third one, she gets this little wooden doll that she thinks is a nice little trinket and everything, but it held a curse or whatever, and it tried to kill her, type of thing. If you look at it, it's freaking terrifying. It used to scare the hell out of me as a kid. But that's what those things
that explains so much.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, if you were to look at a picture, look up Trilogy of Terror, and look at the picture of this little Zuni fetish with the teeth and the knife and the kitchen knife and everything, you'd see the connection between that and the little things in Mummy 2. So again, the presence of these little mystical creatures, that in and of itself does not bother me. The way they treated them, though, man, it's just like, again, what? Abominable snowman? And I'm just like, oh god.
They call them Yetis.
Yeah, well, then she goes, it's like, yeah, they're called Yetis and everything. I was like, I don't care. It's like...
it wasn't so much the introduction of the Yetis. I agree they could have been used better. I actually could have lived without them. I think it was just a tip of the hat, if you will, and not a very good one, to the second movie. Like, look, there's more than just mummies. There's magical creatures and mythical creatures. But they were hip, I guess? I mean, the Yeti kicks the Chinese soldier through the uprights and raises his hand like he made a field goal, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? How? Why?
Apparently they are American football fans.
In the Himalayas, before TV, when they couldn't see anything and know that hand signal was a thing. How does that work? It was one of those things where I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to be cute and make a joke in the middle of the movie.
Yeah.
It was just one of those like, yeah, no, I'm not feeling it.
No.
On a side note, I did go look up the Trilogy of Terror photo, and I do see what you're talking about. Yeah, that is a lot like the little things in The Mummy 2. They got huge, nasty teeth.
Yeah. Just look at the bones, man. Yeah, that it was to say, it's like, when you said you weren't feeling it, I felt something, but it wasn't good. When he did the uprights, and it's just really, please.
Yeah. And then they were gone. It was like, oh, yep, and we are done with Yetis. We don't need you anymore. Thank you. It's like the yak. Like when Nina was sitting down, the yak yacked. That was his one joke. And then Jonathan had to have somebody to talk to because everyone else was already paired off. So he talked to the yak, and then the yak goes away. Like, really? What was the point of the yak?
Yeah.
Was it ballast in the airplane? Did I miss something? Why was he even in the airplane?
Thank you, because that was the funniest thing that Nina said. It's like when the scene in the plane is like, why is there a cow on the plane? It's like, I think it's a yak, and I think it's ballast. But then no, it's there for a punchline. It yacked. That's so
exactly. And then he set it free. I mean, what was the point? I didn't get it. It was totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like a lot of other things in this movie. So
yeah. Oh, okay. again, armchair quarterback. I mean, that seems to be a lot of this in this film and everything. But again, having a military background and also playing a lot of video games and reading a lot of historical books about conflict and military actions, that whole battle at the gates of Shangri-La was completely unnecessary. Because
with the rocket launchers,
well, not even the rocket
machine
launchers.
guns.
You can have the machine guns, you can have the gun battle, okay? But the whole idea of, like, you know, we can't let them through. Okay. One, you've got an incredible choke point right there, because they can only go through the one door. Okay? I mean, you've heard the phrase that Sweden can be defended with 3 men and a rifle?
Yeah, because there's only one way to get in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because of the hills and everything, and, you know, you can hold off an army. Or better yet, the Battle of Thermopylae was a choke point.
Yeah, 300.
300 Spartans along with a few thousand other Greeks, but, you know, a smaller force held off hundreds of thousands or a million, depending who you ask, you know, because it was a choke point. You had that classic situation there where it was a doorway. You also had a rope bridge. You don't want them to get across? You want to save the world? Cut the bridge.
Yeah, I think you'll figure out another way around. Obviously, you know Yetis, so I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, you know, and it's even that when they fell, it's like, okay, fall back. Okay, they're falling back. Again, they're not guarding the doorway. They let everybody just pill through, so they spread out and everything, and it's just like, I felt the same emotions that I feel in horror movies when they don't really kill the bad guy. You know, it's just like, oh, he's dead. I'll just accept that he's dead and just walk away like nothing's wrong anymore. You know, it's like,
yeah, it'll be fine. It's all good. Yeah, the doorways in tactical parlance is called the fatal funnel for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. They're not tactical geniuses. So, again, another, maybe it's a flaw, maybe it's not, but Michelle Yeoh's character is a witch, or at least whatever
witch,
they use the term.
Sorceress.
Yeah, they use the term witch, so we'll roll with that.
Okay.
But in this universe, in at least China, there were other mages, you know, wizards, whatever the heck you want to call them, who taught the emperor how to manipulate the elements. Earth, wind, fire, water, Captain Planet, whatever. And Michelle Yeoh's character had 2,000 years or so, whatever, to master those same skills and pass them on to her daughter. Why wasn't she whipping out some magic? I mean, was there something special about the Emperor? Was he born with the magic gene and all she got to do was drink the water and know some stuff? Because she threw up that book and hovered it in midair while she was reading Sanskrit. You know, why was there no magic? I think that would have been actually kind of a neat thing to take into the third movie, is the introduction of your good guys being able to use magic. Why didn't we have that? Aside from talking to Yetis, no one, aside from Jet Li's character, exhibited anything that had any sort of magical power. Like, well, shouldn't she have learned some stuff along the way? Maybe stole the books from the old guys? She had an opportunity. The whole army turned into freaking terracotta. What's the problem? You could have went back and got that stuff. You got all the time in the world. You're immortal.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot of things that if I were in that situation, there may be a lot of things I would have done a little differently, you know?
Yeah, and I kind of feel a little guilty for doing, as you said, the armchair quarterbacking.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, I do like to watch a movie, and I like to be entertained, and I will say that I do flip-flop on this movie. Sometimes when I watch it, I'm like, oh, this is just fun. You know what? Never mind. I'm having a good time. It's all right.
No.
And other times I'll look at it and go, that was kind of dumb. I don't really care for that. There's some fun bits in there, like I said, so meh.
No, I'm sorry. For me, this is not that movie, because there's movies I can watch. I mean, even I can armchair quarterback Saving Private Ryan. To me, that's an extreme thing, because ultimately, it is a good movie. Ultimately, a lot of what they do in these extraordinary circumstances are probably improvisations they had to make in a very stressful and trying time, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, this movie's entertaining to me because it does show struggle. It does show, quick decision making and doing the best you can with what you had. Yeah, I could probably armchair quarterback that, but that's exactly what it is. It's armchair quarterbacking. Whereas this is not entertaining to me. I cannot even have fun with this because it's so much of like, oh, come on.
There's so many cliches, and kind of going back to your could have let the woman who had spent her entire 2,000-year-old life have her moment in the sun. One of the other things that is, I guess, cliche is you got these badass martial arts warriors who are getting their butts kicked by people who happen to be able to improvise and throw one punch. And don't get me wrong, in the right situation, that's entirely possible. But when they're being thrown across rooms and breaking concrete blocks and crap like that when they run into them, I'm pretty sure they're down for the count. Like, yeah, no, that's at least 3 ribs broken right there. That's not even a getting up. That's a ow, call somebody. I'm about to die.
Okay, you win.
Next.
Conquer the world. Do your thing.
Exactly.
You do
well,
you.
At least I won't see him conquer the world. Damn. There's just so many things that they could have done differently. And again, you can, like you said, you can go through any movie and pick the things you're like, maybe I would have liked to have seen that done differently. But there's so many things in here that are like, not really buying it.
You know, it's funny. It's like we got to really dig for positive things to say. And this one actually I didn't have to dig very far. I had a Galaxy Quest moment in this movie.
Oh.
Do you remember the scene when it was during the climax they're in the bowels of the ship and it was that whole like useless mechanical movement?
Yeah. The smashers.
All the things that were going on. It's like, what? Yeah, and it's like, why is this here? You know, it's like, that was a stupid episode. Why? Why do we have this? You know? And that's what I kept thinking, that whole thing. It's like, where are they now? What's he doing? Why are all these gears moving? What is this? This is a stupid scene.
What the hell is this all about? I don't even know.
So it made me think of Galaxy Quest, so I guess that's not all bad.
There are worse things you could think about while watching this movie. So the other question that I have that, again, doesn't make sense in the plot of the movie is, why was he able to change forms again? What was the magic involved in that? They never discussed that in their intro, that I recall.
Yeah, that was something that Michelle Yeoh's character just says, is if he can do this, and he'll take on all kinds of shapes.
You never mentioned that before.
That's the thing. You know?
It kind of would have been important to mention he could turn into a fire-breathing dragon.
No. He turned into King Ghidorah. That's what he did. Wings, 3 heads, breathing fire. That was King Ghidorah.
Ironically, that was on television 2 days ago. I didn't watch it. I was busy doing something else.
You want to say this movie, Godzilla should have came out and said, hey.
But Godzilla's in Japan, so stop making stereotypes about East Asians.
Yeah, but see, that would have been great, because, you know, it's like Japan was just defeated trying to conquer China, and here's their last-ditch effort. They send in a Godzilla.
Weird side note, I think you posted it, actually. There's another Godzilla movie coming out, right? Godzilla King of the Monsters?
Oh, yeah.
Good. I like Godzilla movies.
Yeah, it's a sequel to the 2014 reboot.
Yeah, which wasn't terrible. I mean, I've seen worse Godzilla movies.
No, I mean, the main complaint, again, which they had in a few other monster movies, you know, is like too much of the people, not enough of Godzilla.
I would have liked to have seen more of the monsters.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen more Godzilla, which it had a lot of, but not enough. So hopefully this new one, which will feature both Godzilla and 3 of his main nemesis.
Nemesi?
It's good to have...
Nemesises.
Nemesises. Oh, is it Mothra, Rodan, and most notably King Ghidorah.
Ah.
So I'm kind of wondering where the lines will be drawn. If it's going to be a free-for-all, is there going to be some sort of team-up, or what? We'll see.
You know, again, we're totally off subject, but we'll bring it back around in some way, shape, or form. We'll find a way to segue back into this movie. But one of my favorite monsters of all time in monster films from the 50s and 60s is a Gamera, flying turtle, flame shootout, spun around. Love that guy. Saturday afternoon matinees on local television. Man, I used to get giddy if I knew it was a Gamera movie coming up.
Oh, yeah. I loved him. I mean, like I said, Godzilla inches him out, but I love the Gamera as well. And there's a fantasy genre that, one day they could come together in a single film. Who knows?
That would be awesome.
But, I mean, obviously they were made by 2 entirely different movie companies. They're 2 entirely different universes so far.
Yeah. DC
who
and
knows?
Marvel have come together in the comic books. I think they'll figure it out.
Yeah, somebody will do it.
But to tie that in actually to this movie, the Saturday afternoon matinees, and by extension going back to the 40s, the 30s and 40s, the serials that The Mummy 2, and I guess this movie are trying to capture, those were a lot of fun. And you knew it was episodic, and there was, as Nina said about this movie, some cheese, but it was the 40s, and you could only do what you could do with the special effects, and this movie should be right at the highlight of what you can do with special effects. And some of the CGI was crap, and I get it. It's kind of that serial feel, the old school movies where it's just, a rollicking good time. But I think that audiences have matured in their tastes since that time, and I think they actually expect something resembling a plot that they can at least latch onto that's more than just a rehash of the same thing.
Yeah.
I think that's why this movie did so poorly at the box office. And looking at the IMDb page, it gets a 5.2 out of 10. It gets a 31 on the Metascore. I don't even know what it got on Rotten Tomatoes, but nobody really liked this movie, and obviously it was not the handoff that I think it was supposed to be, as mentioned earlier.
I agree with that. It seemed like it had big aspirations, but it kind of really fell short.
Yeah, absolutely.
It had a lot of potential.
One of the things that was interesting, now I own this on Blu-ray, and this I think was one of the first Blu-rays that I bought because it was Blu-ray, and like, oh, high definition, yay, we got to watch this. It could be the high definition that throws it off a little bit when you're watching it on the screen, but from the standpoint of owning the Blu-ray, and I know we've talked about when DVDs first came out and how we've had some that we've had to flip over in the middle, or one side was the widescreen, the other side was the pan and scan, and how, the special features on this are the theatrical trailer and maybe some other trailers. This one actually had some really cool stuff that if it were a movie that I actually enjoyed, I might have, played around with it to see what it was. But it was Universal, as we mentioned before about who put this out, and they had this, I think they were trying to market it as a new way to watch Blu-rays, but it's called You Control. So you control the movie. So all of the extra features, you can pop open a menu, and when there is audio commentary or a variation on the scene or anything else, you can just push the up button and it will go, cycle through the menu options and listen to the director's commentary or the actor's commentary. And you can do that for each of the scenes, and it's only for that little piece of time that it's actually there. So some have 4, some had 2, some had none. And it was an interesting concept that I did not explore because I think, and again, already kind of talked about this, I would have had to watch the movie again. And I think it'll probably be another 10 years or so before I watch this, seriously pulling it off the shelf and go, okay.
I'm thinking of Phoebe from the show Friends. I was like, oh, that sounds like something great. I'd love to, but I don't want to.
Yeah, that's so awesome. No, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, 13% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, well, appropriately so.
13% on the tomato meter, audience score 30%.
Well, the audience has spoken. It's a little splatted tomato thing.
Apologies to the actors. I mean, generally you have done good things. This just wasn't one of them.
And I've seen some good movies with Brendan Fraser in there. I don't know that I've seen new Evie in anything that I liked.
Yeah. His son, I don't know. He kind of had that pudgy face that I don't recognize him from anything, and I just... he kind of reminds me of this character from a movie that Mystery Science Theater 3000 messed with. It was called Ega, and the actor's name was Arch Hall Jr., and they really railed on him. So he kind of reminded me of that guy.
He did not go on to do much of anything. This was, I think, according to his IMDb, the biggest thing that he really did. And I don't know that the young lady that played Michelle Yeoh's daughter went on to do anything. But Jet Li, we all know who he is, and he's great for action movies. He's actually a decent actor, more so than just the martial arts bits, which we tend to expect from him.
Yeah, I don't know if I can say that there is a movie where he really acted, like really deeply acted. But I think that's just, his, I don't want to say bad luck, or just that was his fortune that he just gets cast in these movies where, he doesn't have a chance to do that. I think if he was given the chance.
Well, I absolutely loved him in Hero.
Yes. I will tip my hat to that.
And that's on our list, so, at some point we're going to be reviewing that.
Mm-hmm.
But Brendan Fraser, I'm kind of ambivalent. I mean, I've seen some of the movies he did in the 90s, like Encino Man and Blast from the Past and those sort of things. You're like, meh. I liked him in the first two Mummies. I mean, and he was, I don't want to say serviceable in this. I mean, it was another Mummy movie that he was in. Yay.
Well, I don't know. This one, it seemed like like the testosterone-induced scene about who's got the better guns.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not about size; it's about endurance. It's like, oh, great, they're having a dick conversation. But it almost sounded like he was purposely deepening his voice too. Oh, you want to use this?
Yeah, and that was a totally pointless scene. That was nothing. There was no reason for that other than to show that he and his son were confrontational, which, again, we didn't see any of that history. When last we left our roguish couple and their adventuresome son, they were hot on the heels of defeating Imhotep and the Scorpion King, and there was some, like, he keeps getting into trouble and I don't know how to dad, but at the end it was kind of like, yeah, I'm a dad, yay. And then you find out he was just stereotypical, I don't understand my son, dad. I mean, there's so many stereotypes and cliches in this movie. The more we talk about it, the more I keep thinking, oh yeah, there's another one. Yep, there's another one. Oh, that was one too. Again, it's okay to put stereotypes in movies, but you really have to have the acting chops to pull it off, to make it work. And I don't think anybody in this movie, again, aside from Michelle Yeoh, had the chops to make this work in a way that was meaningful as a story.
Yeah, I got nothing to add to that. You pretty much said it.
Yeah, so did you have anything that you wanted to add? Because I've really pretty much covered everything that I think I wanted to cover.
There's only one other thing that I jotted down on my notes, but I don't know if it bears saying. Again, this is more of a general overall cliche thing, which I kind of just, this is the cliche of, it doesn't matter what gun you're using, but he was using a semi-automatic, and he runs out of bullets, and it's the click, click, click. I don't know if anybody has ever used a semi-automatic pistol, but when you run out of bullets, there is no click, click, click. It's just it doesn't fire anymore.
That's not true. The Beretta 9mm, when you pull the trigger, the hammer goes back and it falls on nothing, so you can keep dry firing it.
When you have a magazine in it, the slide is held back.
Oh, right, that part. Yeah, okay. No, I'm with you there. When you're done, it's unless you're conditioned to automatically go clunk and move it forward. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that respect. But if the slide moved forward, you can dry fire.
Yeah, well, in the scene, you can kind of see that the slide was held back because the magazine was empty, and you still had that click, click, click. I don't know. I try to be forgiving of that and say, well, the audience needs to know that it's empty. I don't know. Make them look at it and like, oh, that's how I'm at the range, when it runs out and I'm like, oh man.
And that's what it is, though. I think if you recall the Sandra Bullock movie, The Net, as an example.
Okay, I've never seen that, but...
Okay, well, any movie in the mid-90s that was set when laser printers existed, or inkjet printers, and they would print something, and you would hear a dot matrix sound. Like,
oh, yeah.
Like, that was because people were so conditioned to that noise to think something's printing that had it made the real noise, they'd be like, what's it doing? Nowadays, we're conditioned to inkjet and laserjet, and it's just the natural noise.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they also did in, like, the 80s, whenever something was printing on that white and gray screen, or black and white gray screen for the computer, sometimes it would make printer noise as it was coming up on the screen, or it would make a dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, like it was actually making noise when it came up on the screen. I don't know, I've looked at a lot of computer screens, and unless there was something specifically in the programming, just staring at the DOS prompt never made a noise in its entire existence that I know of. So
Yeah.
that's kind of just an association thing. That doesn't bother me a whole lot, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I will concede that I am very nitpicky on details like that. But like I said, I'm a firm believer in the devil's in the details. You want to bring up other things that annoy me, like when you get the movies with the hospital scene and the patient sitting in bed with a nasal cannula, but for some reason you hear the ventilator going stop, stop.
It's not really how
he's
that
not attached
works.
to a. No, and then the helicopters that you'll always hear the classic 1970s Jet Ranger, no matter what helicopter it is. Yeah, granted, it's technical. People just, you're right, they're conditioned to hear a helicopter, but for me, I'm like, that's not how that helicopter sounds. The only two movies that I can recall off the top of my head that actually gave us a true to life helicopter sound was Black Hawk Down
and Airwolf.
They actually sounded like No, not Airwolf. That was actually movie magic. It was Blue Thunder. It's contemporary. Because that Blue Thunder was derived from a French-made helicopter, and it had 3 blades and not 2, like the old Jet Rangers of the day. And it made a much different sound. And I'm so glad that movie had that sound versus the Jet Ranger.
Which is probably why Blue Thunder didn't go super wide, because it sounded like a real helicopter and people didn't know what they were listening to.
Yeah, I think the motivation may not have been for accuracy, whereas to show that this helicopter was unique among the rest. So, again, intentions, but the result, was memorable to me or anything. And like I said, the devil's in the details.
And I agree. Airwolf had whisper mode, so, I mean, they just had to turn off the sound.
Yeah. But that, again, Airwolf, again, you had to show that this helicopter was unique. But Airwolf only had, if I recall, it was only a 2-bladed, and it would have sounded like, again, an old Huey. It would have had that whoop, 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 whoop sound. Because helicopters with more blades tend to be a little bit more quiet. And it's like, so you get an Apache gunship, 4 blades, a lot quieter.
Yeah.
That's why some people have nicknamed it Whispering Death.
Well, I think Airwolf was an incredibly noisy helicopter, mostly because every time they would fly around, the speakers would come out and play.
Well, that and it had 2 jet engines, so I can imagine that thing was very stealthy.
But we have completely digressed from this movie.
Yeah. It's a desperate attempt to hold on to something.
Which may tell you where this movie belongs on our shelves, and I think we pretty much led to that conclusion in the beginning. But Dan, if you owned this movie, where would it belong on your shelf?
The deepest, darkest corner of general population.
I'm right there with you. I would actually, on a 5-shelf, sort of system, I would put this at the back of the 4th shelf. It's not the worst movie that I own. I've seen far worse. It still, again, at times entertains me in parts. So I'm not going to put it all the way on the bottom shelf at the very end. But it's back of the pack. It's not that good.
I guess the final note I can say on this movie, it's like it wasn't even bad enough to be interesting. And believe me, I own bad movies.
I own plenty of bad movies that are so bad they come right back around again, and they're good.
Yeah, and that's my point. It's like they're bad movies that are entertaining. I mean, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Come on, that is not an Academy Award-winning movie. Okay? But it's entertaining. Yeah, it should be. There should be a
Listen
category.
to the people.
Okay, and I am fully intent on getting a copy of The Room.
Oh, okay. Well, have fun with that.
Are you not familiar with that movie?
I'm familiar with the movie. In the sense that I know of it, and I have no desire to watch it. I've watched some movies that you have recommended, and said, "Oh, well, that was a movie that just happened in front of my eyeballs, and I'm not sure I want to see it again." So there.
Well, if you look, just an interesting perspective on that movie. Somebody brought up the theory, though, that forgive me, I cannot pronounce his name, but Steve Zissou or whatever his name is.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch it and look at him speak, it's almost like how an alien would try to communicate with humans, but wasn't very well trained.
Okay.
I gotta watch it again and see, like, just. He kind of watched a little bit of like television or read a few books or whatever, and it's like, okay, I think I got this. And he tries to speak with humans and doesn't quite get it.
But Okay, so we have established that this is not at the top of either of our lists. You want to find out what we're doing next then?
Well, one last thing is if our listeners, think that we could review an even worse movie, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. And once we get through what we're going to review next, we will give you ways to contact us. So feel free and let us know.
So let's go for it. What's next?
I really hope we get a good movie this time. Really hope we get a good movie. Come on, good movie. Big bucks, no whammies.
Zodiac.
Oh, this is interesting. I don't actually own this. I've seen it, but this is one of your movies.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I haven't actually sat down and watched that with a critical eye. I've watched it from pointy end to flat end and kind of paid attention, but it was one of those I know I have to sit down and actually pay attention to it. So, yeah, cool. Well, that'll be fun.
I'd like to watch that again. I haven't watched it in a while, but yeah, it's definitely...
Well, I hope so, because you're watching it in 2 weeks and we're talking about it, so...
Okay. All right, sounds good.
All right. And with that, listeners, if you have any comments or feedback or think this movie is the greatest thing since sliced bread and want to let us know about it, you can let us know on our Facebook page. You can follow us on Twitter at OurShelvesW is our Twitter handle, I believe is still the correct terminology. You can email us at WRIOS2016mr@gmail.com, or you can send up a carrier pigeon or write it out in Sanskrit in China in the past and bury it and let archaeologists find it. Anyway, so let us know what you think. And Dan, what is your movie-themed goodbye for this one? You know it's going to happen.
You know what? Yeah, I know. While I'm thinking about that, though, I have to make a correction when we were talking about Hero. I had basically made it that Jet Li was the one who was the emperor in that movie trying to unite China, when actually he was the character who was trying to assassinate. He was the assassin, so that's my mistake. But the sentiment is still the same. The man who was the emperor who was trying to unite. So if Jet Li was able to infuse that character into the Dragon Emperor in this movie that we're talking about, that's what I was trying to convey.
Okay.
So, a little error on my part, but yeah, the switch, but the sentiment is still the same. So I just wanted to make that correction. So. What, she speaks Yeti?
Yes, she does, and I don't know what Yeti for goodbye is. So, with that, listeners, we will see you in 2 weeks with Zodiac.
Bye.